Welcome everyone to SpaceWeek Live for August 16th, 2020. Good heavens. Yeah, hey, at least I know I'm not the only YouTuber that suffers technical difficulties. But anywho, all right, go for audio. So last week was pretty quiet, not a whole lot going on, but there were a couple events of note which we shall cover here. First of all, thank you all for coming. Welcome. Which I will type, if I can use my fingers, I will type in the chat, welcome. Thank you, Microsound. I'm glad to be called a likable idiot. I'm ever self-deprecating, so I don't pretend to be any fancier than I really am. So yes, I am sometimes an idiot, but that's fine. We all are. Anywho, let's go ahead and get to the news of the week. So last Monday, look, it's Arecibo again. So last Monday, a steel cable support at the Arecibo Radio Astronomy Observatory in Puerto Rico snapped, falling on the dish and creating a gash 100 feet long, which is unprecedented damage to this very famous and significant radio astronomy dish. The steel cable mesh that supports the dish also broke, causing a bunch of debris to fall to the ground below. Engineers, so far as I'm aware, engineers haven't yet determined the cause of the cable failure, but this is a very old facility. Arecibo was originally built in 1963, and over the years has suffered numerous problems. Back in 2017, Hurricane Maria knocked out power in Puerto Rico for months and caused one of the 29-meter antennae to fall, or to what was destroyed, and it fell, puncturing the dish. There have been earthquakes in 2014 and 2020, and probably prior to that, that caused damage to the dish and blocked road access to it. The COVID pandemic has prevented astronomers from accessing the facility, but the radio telescope has continued to be used because it can be operated remotely. So this latest damage is significant, but if you look at the picture, the dish itself is not high tech. Like the dish, it's basically just aluminum. An aluminum framework with mesh that creates a surface off of which the radio frequencies from space can then reflect back up into the receiver array, which is open image, which is this thingy, which is where most of the technology is located, and it's still old technology, but this is the critical, this is the highest tech part of the installation. This is where all those radio frequencies from that very large dish are concentrated, and then they are received by this, and then carried through cabling to computers, etc., etc. So this wasn't damaged. Just the surface of the dish itself was damaged. Now this is a picture from 2 years ago, after Hurricane Maria. You can see the dish is looking a little worse for wear, but there's no major damage. But this latest damage is by far the most extensive that has happened. Fortunately, though, because the damage was to this aluminum framework with mesh material, it shouldn't be too expensive to fix, as opposed to if the supports for the receiver array somehow failed and it came crashing down. That would be many millions of dollars, and probably take quite a long time, because Arecibo has traditionally faced funding challenges to begin with. So You may recognize the dish from various movies, such as Contact with Jodie Foster and GoldenEye, I think, the James Bond movie it was featured in. So very famous installation and very cool. For decades, it was the largest single radio astronomy dish in the world. There is a larger one now in China that was built a few years ago, but okay, microsound, aluminium. No, I'm American. I call it aluminum. But yeah, most radio astronomy installations are done using interferometry, where they use multiple smaller dishes, such as at the Very Large Array in New Mexico, which was also featured in Contact and other movies. And I've been there, by the way. The Very Large Array is a fascinating place, very cool, with I don't know how many dishes they have rolled out at any given time, but up to 30 dishes arrayed in this big Y shape on the plateau. But so normally they use multiple smaller dishes and the technology of interferometry to combine the signals into a single virtual dish of a larger size. But as far as single large dishes, this was the biggest for a very long time. However, all right. Moving on to the only launch last week was on Saturday, an Ariane 5 rocket with the Galaxy 30 MEV-2 and BSat-4B communication satellites finally successfully launched into a geostationary orbit. This was the first launch from the ESA's Space Center, the European Space Agency's Space Center in French Guiana, in 6 months, since another Ariane 5 launch last February. They tried to launch, so first of all, the Space Center was shut down in March due to COVID, and they tried to launch a Vega rocket in June, but the launch was scrubbed multiple times, at least 5 times, due to unfavorable wind conditions, because they are, after all, on the coast in South America at the north edge of the Amazon rainforest, and the weather is tricky. And since those scrubs back in June, the Vega, to my knowledge, has not been put back on the schedule yet. But when it is, I'll definitely let you know, and you'll be able to catch that live stream here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the chat. I welcome your questions about whatever space-related topics, whether they be rocketry or cosmology or whatever. Please do make sure to tag my name in your question so that I see it, because the chat can get busy, and it's not very fun for me to have to scan through pages of text in order to identify the question. So if you can just put my name, raw space, in your question, it'll be highlighted for me and I'll see it. So let me scroll up here real quick and see if I can see anything. I'm not seeing any questions so far. Get Real says, screw the professional channels, we love you, raw. So that's sort of a backhanded compliment, the implication being that I'm not professional, but I guess that's true, so glad to be of service. At least I'm glad to do what I can for you. Kirstine Gray mentions that I cut my beard. Yes, I did. I lost the beard. I couldn't keep it any longer. It was driving me nuts. I like how I look with the beard, but I just couldn't keep it. So clean shaven I shall remain. Well, plus scruff because I'm lazy. Peter S., regarding Arecibo, says the cable junction that snapped was installed in the 90s to upgrade the weight of the instrumentation platform. That's good info. Michael Woodbury seems to have some criticisms. That's fine. Just please try to remain civil. That's always encouraged in the chat, because lack of civility leads to unceremonious ejections by the moderators. Get Real says you can see Arecibo also in the movie 2010. Maybe you mean 2012? Was there a 2010 movie? Oh, 2010. Of course. Wait. No, 2010, the successor to 2001, A Space Odyssey. I remember they were at... Oh, he's referring to the Very Large Array. Yes, the Very Large Array was featured in the movie 2010 with Roy Scheider talking to some Russian official at the VLA. Interestingly, I actually have photos of the VLA that I took way back in 1996-ish. I won't try to... Well, maybe I could hear. You know what? I'll find them while I'm talking. And... Scanned. Faves. Here we go. So yeah, I took this photo. I took a lot of others, but this is the one I have easiest access to. Took this photo of a very small portion of the VLA back in the 90s. A very cool spot. Very cool place. Like I said, it's, you go there and it takes a while to get there. It's in the middle of nowhere, but there's antelope wandering around, munching on the grass. There's and if you've ever seen an antelope, it's kind of like a deer with long horns. But cows wandering around, unrestricted. Very cool spot. But getting back to the chat, Maria Kutujan is asking... Oh, okay, before Maria's question, Peter S. asked... or states that he wishes the ESA would get an announcer that wasn't more at home narrating children's books. That is funny. I don't recall the name of Ariane Space's primary commentator, but she does really have a children's book sort of voice, doesn't she? But in any case, she conveys the information, so we should consider ourselves lucky that we get to see those launches, because it's definitely not a given. China does lots of stuff in space, but they don't show it to the rest of the world. We don't get to see the Chinese launches very often, except after the fact, but certainly not live. Now, Maria Kutujan asks, why in the last SN5 hop landing there was fire in the Raptor? Okay, so I think she's referring to during the Starship SN5 prototype hop 2 weeks ago. There was they started with the view of the rocket lifting off, or the tank lifting off, whatever, the grain silo, and then they switched to an internal view from inside the skirt of the rocket, where you saw the single Raptor engine firing, you saw the landing gear, the landing legs pop down, and there was a fire on the side of the Raptor engine, which didn't look like it belonged. And I haven't read anything specific on that, but the presumption is that there was some sort of methane leak where there shouldn't have been. And doubtless SpaceX has probably already fixed the problem, because they probably know exactly where they've already analyzed the Raptor after it landed, and found the leak and reinforced whatever valve or connection needed to be reinforced in order to ensure that leak doesn't happen again. But that's all it was a fuel leak of some sort because the Raptor is an exceptionally complex engine. Like if you look at a picture of a detailed picture of a Raptor engine next to other engines, it looks like a spaghetti mess. There's just hoses and cables and stuff everywhere. It's a very complex engine, which means there are a lot of points at which something can go wrong. But I'm confident that SpaceX will we'll get it fixed, and that leaks in the future will be mitigated. So, let's see. Greetings, Daniel Charlton. This is not Yoda asks, what is the fastest thing humans have created? That would be the Parker Solar Probe. Well, I mean, you could say that we've generated lots of light as a species, and light is, of course, the fastest thing ever, but it's not a physical thing. Light is photons, which are a weird sort of creature that is both a particle and a wave and has properties of both. But in any case, the fastest physical object that humans have created is the Parker Solar Probe, which has been zipping around in an orbit that will bring it closer and closer to the sun over the next 5 years or so, because it launched back in 2018, not too terribly long after I started streaming on this channel. It was one of the first, as a matter of fact, it might have been the very first launch stream I did, was the Parker Solar Probe. And it was going to take up to like 7.5 years in its orbit of like, it would swing around Venus a bunch of times and Earth once or twice, and eventually get into an orbit that would take it within, 3 million miles of the surface of the sun, which is way closer than anything else has been. And so the way orbits work is, as you, I mean, all orbits are elliptical, and as you, hey, look at that. So you can consider all orbits are elliptical, and if you look at an orbit and place the sun near the narrow end of one of those orbits. I wish I could draw on the screen. It would be useful. As you whip around the sun, you maintain your angular momentum. So you're still like, if you, well, you know what? I should make a video on it sometime, because explaining it off the top of my head is difficult. But just rest assured that as you slingshot around the sun, your speed increases dramatically, and then as you get further away from the sun, your speed is going to slow down. And so each time it approaches the sun closer and closer, it travels faster and faster, but then it slows down again as it goes back out. So in 5 years, when it makes its closest approach to the sun, then it will be going something like 150, hold on a sec, let me, Parker Solar Probe. Yeah, when it makes its closest approach, it'll be going 430,000 miles per hour, briefly, as it whips past the sun. And during that brief time, they will be collecting as much data as they can. So Joe Blow the Hot asks, "What's this background?" I'm not sure if he was referring to the radio dishes or the Earth behind me right now. The radio dishes were a portion of the Very Large Array radio telescope in the Radio Astronomy Observatory in New Mexico. They're a couple hours from Albuquerque, and the picture that you saw with the radio dishes lined up is one that I took myself when I visited there. This is not Yoda asks, is there any chance that aliens will contact us? Well, there are a lot of big question marks there. The first big question mark being, are there aliens with intelligence? And we don't know. We have no idea. The second question would be, if there are advanced species that would be able to reach out to us, would they have any motivation to do so? Is there any reason at all that they would have to reach out to this little mud ball with humans on it? I don't see any benefit in that, because we kind of suck as a species, and any alien intelligence sufficient to reach out over the cosmos and dial in one of their neighbors is going to be so far beyond our technical level that we wouldn't be able to provide them with any kind of benefit. If anything, they might sit back and observe us to see how a young technological species, other than themselves, handles things, whether we blow ourselves up or starve ourselves out or whatever. This is Not Yoda also asks, he's full of questions today. This is Not Yoda also asks, are there other sun colors like green and purple? So there are a variety of colors emitted by, well, there are a variety of wavelengths of light that are emitted by various stars, including blue and red and yellow and white. Green and purple, I mean, I think there are actually greenish stars. Don't think there are any purple stars, but it has to do with the temperature of the surface of the star, but and also the chemistry of the star, which is primarily hydrogen and helium. But yeah, I don't think there are any rainbow stars, but there are a variety of colors, which you can see. You can kind of see the colors of stars if you just look up on a nice clear night, but the colors really pop out if you do like a long camera exposure. You can see that the colors of the stars are very obviously different. You're like, there's a yellow one, there's a red one, there's a blue one, and it's really quite striking if you do a long camera exposure. Anthony USMC asks, did you hear anything about the late booster ignition on the launch yesterday? He read a few comments on the live feed about it. I did not hear anything about, so he's referring to the Ariane 5 launch. I did not hear anything about it. Okay, so let's revisit yesterday's launch. All right, first of all, I didn't show you the video yet, so let me bring that up. But yesterday's launch stream was a weird one because I was at my sister's house at the time, and here we go. I was at my sister's house at the time, and I started the stream while I was sitting on their boat out on the lake, and then I switched to the Ariane Space live feed with their test tones beep moments before stepping off the boat into the water to get on their inflatable Viking inflatable like inner tube thing that they towed behind the boat. So I wasn't paying attention for I was literally being dragged behind a boat at the time that the rocket was lifting off. So actually, no, we did make it back before the liftoff because the liftoff was delayed due to meteo, the weather. And so by the time the rocket lifted off, I was back inside the house. But I was still surrounded by family and very much distracted, so I didn't notice the any anomalies in the booster ignition timing or anything. And I haven't read anything about that either. Daniel Charlton asks, can you explain how quantum physics and future space travel are connected? Quantum physics. Well, I am not a quantum physicist. I am no sort of a physicist whatsoever. I'm an information technologist with an interest in space. So my actual area of expertise is computers. But future space travel, the major obstacle to space travel outside of our own solar system, because we can travel wherever we want in our solar system, and we have. We have visited every planet, and we can do so again. It just takes, a few years to get to the outer planets, as opposed to a few months to get to the inner ones. But outside of our own solar system is a whole different magnitude of distances involved. I mean, so the Voyager 1 probe is zipping out of our solar system at however fast it's going, and if it were aimed, it's not aimed at the nearest star, which is Proxima Centauri. But if it were aimed at Proxima Centauri, it would still take it 75,000 years to get there. And so space travel in the future, like even if we were to build a generation ship that was designed to basically house a mini civilization over the course of many centuries in order to reach another star, you would still have the problem of materials. Yeah, I mean, mechanical systems break down as they are used. Electronic systems break down as they are used. And even static systems, even materials themselves, experience, changes over time as they interact chemically with other, like for example, if it was a ship and the people were frozen cryogenically, I mean, like literally the materials of the ship itself would react with the oxygen in the atmosphere, or the cryo material itself, over the course of many centuries or millennia. So I don't know if it will be within the realm of technical possibility for us to reach other stars, unless we're able to find a way to cheat physics, to cheat the known laws of physics as they are now. So if we can somehow, construct a wormhole or warp speed or something that gets around the limitations of the speed of light and the speed of the effects of relativity and the time dilation. I mean, time dilation might not be a concern if you have no plans to go back and visit your home. But like, for example, if you were to, travel to the nearest star at 99% of the speed of light, and then you were to return again, I don't have the actual numbers in front of me, but I mean, a lot of time would have passed back home. And, it would be, I mean, society will have moved on and probably forgotten about you by the time you got back. Space travel beyond our solar system is still quite in the realm of science fiction for the foreseeable future, like not even on the horizon, unless we're able to come up with some quantum leap in the understanding of physics, or some technology that's just, totally circumvents the laws of physics as we know them. We're pretty much stuck here in our own neighborhood. This is Not Yoda asks, the chat scrolled, so I lost it. What was the first woman in space? Off the top of my head, wasn't the first woman in space a Russian lady? But I thought Sally Ride was the first American woman in space. I am not a huge history buff. I mean, I respect history, but I'm not terribly well versed in it. So, that would be a great question for somebody like Vintage Space, who like revels in the history of space flight. She would know, and plus she's a woman, so she would know like instantly which name to quote. Our Knacknud says the Canadian Space Agency used to have ISS astronauts reading children's books. That's pretty cool. This is Not Yoda asks, what will happen to the Earth without its moon? So the moon isn't going anywhere. It's gravitationally bound to the Earth. However, it is very slowly receding away from our planet. Every year, the moon gets a tiny bit farther away, on the order of a few centimeters, I think, every year. And so at some point in the distant future, millions of years in the future, the moon will be smaller in our sky. It will have less effect on the tides. And then like a billion years in the future, the moon, I don't know if the moon is ever going to escape the Earth's gravity, but by that time, the sun will have used up most of its hydrogen, and its outer atmosphere will have expanded to the point where it would probably be destroying life on this planet at that point anyway. So I don't think you have to worry about the moon going anywhere. However, if the moon were to magically disappear and we no longer had it, let's say it just decided to yeet itself out of the solar system, and we were left without a moon, then our tides would be severely affected. Plate tectonics might even be affected, because the moon does exert a pull on the crust of the Earth as well as just the water. But I mean, animals would probably be confused, because they evolved to respond to, various atmospheric and whatever conditions, day, night, moon phases, whatever. But it wouldn't like threaten our species or anything. I mean, the tides would be the main thing we would have to deal with, and but humans are very adaptable. We would be fine. We would just have a new normal to adjust to. Dale Duncan says Valentina Tereshkova was the first woman in space. I thought it was a Russian, or a Soviet actually at that time. This is not Yoda asks, who named Mars? Well, Mars is the Roman god of war, so I guess you could say the Romans. But I mean, lots of different cultures have different names for the various heavenly bodies. And so what did the Greeks call Mars? I don't know. They obviously saw it up in the sky, this red dot. And being one of the brighter objects in the sky, they surely had a name for it. Did they name it Ares? I don't recall. That's an interesting question. But Ares and Mars are equivalent. They're the Greek and Roman god, basically the Roman equivalent of the Mars is the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Ares. So I do not recall if the Greeks called it Ares or the Arabs. Like many of in fact, of the names of stars are Arabic in origin. So I don't know. Let's see. Trying to recall what Arab folks call Mars in my chat. I don't recall. But the moon, all prominently visible heavenly bodies have multiple names that have been given to them by various cultures. And so to ask who named something, like basically everybody named it something else. But the name Mars itself is, of course, the Roman god of war. So I am behind in the chat. Snow Kittens says, now this is way back when we were talking about the colors of stars. Sirius looks like a rainbow star if your atmosphere is very moist, if it's low on the horizon. But that sounds like a refractive effect of the moisture in our atmosphere versus the actual properties of the star. Let's see. This is not Yoda asks, are there other countries that went to space besides the USA, Russia, and China? Other countries have had astronauts. There was a Dutch astronaut. There have been various ESA astronauts, other ESA astronauts. There have been Japanese astronauts, Indian astronauts. But the actual countries that launched those people into space, humans have only been launched into space from the United States, Kazakhstan, under the auspices of Russia, or previously the Soviet Union, and China. I am not aware of any other nations that have actually launched people to space. And as a follow-up question, if no other country went to space, what is the reason? Well, it is really expensive and very dangerous and complicated. You need major resources dedicated to developing a human spaceflight program. I mean, a space program at all, like launching satellites into space, is hard enough, but launching humans into space is an order of magnitude harder because you need much more redundancy in your systems, you need much more testing. You know, the systems need very tight tolerances because they have to support squishy humans on the way up and on the way down, and they're just much more complicated. So, and we've already been there. The Russians have been there, we've been there, China's been there. So it's not like anybody's going to gain, you know, set any new firsts, you know, by getting to space. But I think India is working on a manned space program, but I don't have any information on their progress. Christine Gray asks, do you always wear a cap on the stream? Pretty much. I did do a live stream once without the cap, but so it's interesting to note that I don't normally wear caps. I am not a cap person. However, I have the SpaceX cap, and so it's a form of shouting out to my favorite rocket company. But also, my hair is a grand big mess, especially since it hasn't been cut in 6 months, and so I don't want to look like a schlub or whatever here on the stream. And, you know, wearing caps is a common thing amongst YouTubers because it gives us an extra advertising space for either space companies or our own merch. I mean, like, I've got a NASA shirt on, you know, that I bought down at Kennedy Space Center last year. You know, when we visited, back when you could visit the Saturn V exhibit. And let's see. People are mentioning the Israeli moon crash. Yes, Israel, this was last year, I think. Israel tried to land the Bereshit lander on the moon, which had been a contender for the Google Lunar X Prize, but the time limit for that contest expired, and so nobody could win that prize anymore. But the Israelis persevered, they stuck with it, and they finished developing their Bereshit lander. Unfortunately, it did not successfully land; it crashed. So, but getting to the moon is still quite an accomplishment. And so they can be proud of that. But anyway, did I ever get rickrolled? Sure, everybody's been rickrolled numerous times. But we never gave up, right? 1 centimeter per year, moon moving away from the Earth. Whoops, chat jumped again. So MVM Motovlog Music says, the moon will crash into the Earth billions of years from now. I don't think so, because the moon is actually moving farther away from the Earth. So following that pattern, it won't be crashing into us, it'll be moving farther away from us. It may escape eventually if the sun doesn't chew it up first. And by the way, the Russian cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova went to space in 1963. Good heavens, that was a long time ago. So she was one of the early pioneers. So the first organism, I won't comment on your comment, but I will say, shout out to Oregonians. That's where I was born. So yeah, I want to go visit there again sometime because I miss the mountains. Our Naknud says that without a moon, at least we won't be eaten by werewolves. So that is a good thing. That's a positive outcome from losing the moon. All right, scanning the chat. MVM Motovlog Music asks, when is the next launch broadcast? So, did I not cover the events of the coming week? Shame on me. So let me do that right before I close out. So let's just go ahead and continue, and let me finish answering the questions, then I'll close out. So, any more questions? Okay, this is Not Yoda asks, you said the sun is coming for the Earth. What do you think humans should do to escape this doom? Well, I did say that we basically have free reign of our solar system. You know, I don't know if it will be technically possible for us to ever get to other stars, despite how romantic a notion it is and how appealing it sounds in the realm of science fiction. But other stars are just so far away that that's beyond the foreseeable horizon. But there's no problem with us expanding throughout our own solar system. And in a billion years, or however long, when the sun expands to the point where it threatens life on Earth, we will surely be all over the solar system. I mean, we will probably have civilizations on the moon and on the various asteroids and the Jovian moons and Saturnian moons, Pluto, whatever. We'll have people all over the place. Trillions of people, perhaps. You know, who knows? In floating O'Neill cylinders in space and all of that. So even if Earth is threatened, there's a whole lot of solar system out there that will support basically an endless number of humans. And so I don't think that the expansion of the sun and the threatening of the Earth will ultimately threaten the survival of our species, because by that time we will either be long dead or we will be everywhere, at least in the local neighborhood. Now, a billion years is a long, long time. Consider that all of human history all of recorded history is only in the last couple tens of thousands of years. And so, you know, by that time, we will probably, that is to say, if we still exist, we'll probably look nothing like we do now. We will be evolved, changed, whatever. We may be pure data by then. Who knows? But we definitely will either be okay or we won't. Okay, now that wraps it up for the questions. Let's go ahead and talk about this week. Looking ahead to this week, we have just a couple of events. It's another fairly quiet week. And if I can find my notes, there we go. On Tuesday, August 18th at 10:31 a.m. Eastern, 2:31 p.m. GMT, SpaceX will launch the 11th batch of Starlink satellites, along with 2 SkySat rideshare satellites. So I don't know if they're going to have rideshare satellites tagging along with every Starlink launch, but that seems likely because that helps to offset the cost for SpaceX of the launches. And because remember, Starlink is a SpaceX program, and if SpaceX is launching a SpaceX satellite, nobody's paying them to do that. And so it's a pure expense. Whereas if they include a couple of rideshare satellites, they can help offset some of that cost, or regain some of that expense. And you can catch that live stream, of course, right here on Raw Space. Also on Tuesday at 1 p.m., 1:15, starting at 1:15 p.m. Eastern, 5:15 p.m. GMT, the Japanese HTV-9 Kuonotori cargo craft will depart the ISS. So again, you can catch that live stream here. Now remember, the only cargo craft that comes back down gracefully and lands and splashes down so that we can recover the items on board are the Cargo Dragon modules. The HTV, the Japanese HTV modules, and the Russian Progress cargo modules, and the Northrop Grumman Cygnus, the Cygnus modules, they all burn up on deorbit. They get filled with trash from the ISS, and they deorbit them, and they just burn up in the atmosphere. But we will get to watch the undocking, or the departure of the craft. HTV-9 has to be. It doesn't undock. It unberths and is decaptured using the Canadarm. Whereas the Soyuz, like modules like the Soyuz, actually dock themselves to the space station. But all right, so that wraps it up for this week. Thank you all so much for coming and your numerous questions. I look forward to next week, and until then, keep it raw, and I will catch you later. Thank you very much.